Hey everyone, welcome back to the English Hour. I'm your host, Sophia, and today, we have a very special guest, Jacob. Jacob, it's awesome to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Sophia. I'm excited to be here and dive into today's conversation.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to talk about. We're diving into the topic of motivation in language learning. I think everyone who's learning a new language hits a wall at some point. How do you stay motivated, Jacob, when the going gets tough?
That's a really good question, Sophia. I think motivation is definitely one of the hardest things to maintain in language learning. For me, it's all about setting small, achievable goals. I don't pressure myself to become fluent overnight. Instead, I focus on small wins like learning a certain number of new words each week or practicing speaking every day. Those little victories keep me motivated.
I love that idea. Breaking it down into small steps is a great way to avoid feeling overwhelmed. Do you think it's important to have a deeper why for learning the language, beyond just the technical aspects?
Oh, definitely. Having a personal connection to the language makes all the difference. For me, learning Spanish wasn't just about grammar or vocabulary, it was about connecting with my family who speak Spanish as their first language. That deeper reason gave me the drive to push through when things got tough.
That's such a powerful motivator. It's so much more than just words or sentences. It's about connecting with people, culture, and history. Do you think learners should focus on the emotional connection, rather than just the mechanics of learning a language?
100%. I think the emotional connection makes all the difference. When you're emotionally invested, the learning process doesn't feel like a chore. It becomes something exciting, something meaningful. If you're just focusing on memorizing vocabulary lists without a deeper connection, it can feel really dry.
I totally agree. It's easy to get stuck in the technical side of things, but when you start relating it to real world situations or your personal life, that's when you see progress. Let's talk about some of the challenges you've faced in language learning. What's been the hardest part for you?
For me, the biggest challenge has always been speaking. I'd spend hours listening to podcasts or watching videos, but actually speaking out loud was tough. I think a lot of learners face the same issue. It's easy to understand a language, but it's so much harder to actually speak it. That fear of making mistakes really holds people back.
Oh, I hear that. It's terrifying to speak at first, especially when you're worried about making mistakes or sounding wrong. But, like you said earlier, those small victories, getting through a conversation, or even just saying a few sentences, are huge confidence boosters, right?
Absolutely. And what helped me was just diving in and having conversations, even if they weren't perfect. Every conversation, even if it was awkward, taught me something new. That fear of making mistakes slowly fades when you realize people appreciate your effort, not your perfection.
Yes, that's such a great point. People are usually so supportive when they see you trying to speak their language. But I think it's also important to talk about consistency. Do you have a routine for language practice?
I do. Consistency is key. I try to practice every single day, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes. I'll listen to a podcast, do some vocabulary exercises, or have a quick conversation with someone. The goal is to make it a part of my daily life, rather than cramming it all into one or two big study sessions.
I love that. It's like building a habit rather than just forcing yourself to learn when you can. Have you found that certain resources, like apps or websites, work best for your routine?
Yes, definitely. I use a combination of apps like Duolingo for vocabulary and structure, and I also love Italki for speaking practice. But what I think is the most helpful is surrounding myself with the language. Whether it's watching TV shows, listening to music, or reading in Spanish, those real life resources keep me connected to the language every day.
Real life immersion is such a game changer, isn't it? It feels like everything you consume becomes a learning opportunity. I've heard some people even switch their phone settings to the language they're learning. Have you tried that?
I have, actually, it's a small thing, but it really helps. It forces you to think in the language more, and you start associating the words with the actions. It's one of those sneaky little tricks that boosts your language exposure without it feeling like study.
That's such a simple yet effective tip. Speaking of immersion, have you ever traveled to a country where the language is spoken? How did that affect your learning?
Yes, I went to Spain a couple of years ago, and it made a huge difference. Nothing compares to actually being in a place where you're forced to use the language every day. I remember going to a cafe and having to order coffee in Spanish. At first, I was nervous, but after I did it, I felt so proud and confident.
That's such a great story. The real-world practice gives you such an adrenaline rush, doesn't it? I imagine it also helps you pick up slang or local expressions that you can't really get from a textbook.
Exactly, I think those local expressions and slang are what make a language feel alive. If you only stick to textbook language, you'll miss out on how people actually speak in day-to-day life. And it's those little expressions that make your speech sound natural and authentic.
That's a great point. And I think people sometimes forget that language learning isn't just about the formal way of speaking. It's also about understanding the culture and the way people really interact.
Definitely. That cultural aspect is what makes learning a language so exciting. It's not just about the grammar and vocabulary. It's about how people communicate, how they express emotions, and how their culture influences the way they speak.
It's like unlocking a whole new world. And as you dive deeper into a language, you start to see the connections between the language and the culture. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. And once you start getting that, learning the language feels even more rewarding. You're not just learning words, you're learning about a whole new way of thinking, living, and experiencing the world.
I couldn't agree more. Now, one thing I want to ask you, Jacob, is about mistakes in language learning. A lot of people are afraid to make mistakes, especially when they're starting out. How do you deal with that fear?
It's definitely something I struggled with at first. I think what helped me was realizing that mistakes are a part of the process. You can't learn without making them. The key is to embrace them, learn from them, and move on. Every mistake is a step forward.
That's such a powerful mindset. And I think it's important for learners to remember that no one is expecting perfection. In fact, people will often be more impressed by your effort than by your flawless speech.
Exactly. People will appreciate your attempts, and the more you practice, the fewer mistakes you'll make. It's a cycle. Mistakes lead to improvement, and improvement builds your confidence.
So true. And it's also helpful to have a supportive community around you, whether that's fellow learners or native speakers. Being able to get feedback and encouragement can make all the difference, don't you think?
Absolutely. Having a community to support you is huge. It's not just about practice, it's about feeling like you're not alone in the process. There's something incredibly motivating about being part of a group of people who are all working towards the same goal.
That sense of community can make a huge difference. I think it also helps you stay accountable, right? You don't want to let your language buddies down by not practicing.
Exactly. And it's nice to know that you're not the only one struggling with certain things. We're all in this together.
100%. So, to everyone listening today, if you're feeling discouraged or uncertain about your language journey, just remember consistency, emotional connection, and community are key. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's all part of the adventure.
Well said. Sophia, keep going and don't let the challenges stop you. Every step forward counts, and you're closer to your goal than you think.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for sharing all of that today, Jacob. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and remember you're not alone on this journey. We'll catch you in the next episode. Alright, Jacob, let's dive a little deeper into one of the most crucial aspects of language learning: pronunciation. I know many learners struggle with this, especially when trying to sound natural. What advice do you have for those who find pronunciation challenging?
Oh, pronunciation can definitely be tricky. For me, the biggest challenge was getting the accent right. What helped was listening to native speakers constantly, whether it was through movies, podcasts, or songs. I also spent a lot of time mimicking how they pronounce certain words and sounds. It felt awkward at first, but the more I practiced, the more natural it became.
Mimicry is such a powerful tool. I've heard a lot of people recommend shadowing, where you repeat exactly what the speaker says in real time. Have you tried that?
Yes, I've actually done a lot of shadowing. It's such a great exercise because it forces you to focus on not just the words, but also the rhythm and intonation. It can be tough, especially at first, but once you get into it, you start picking up the natural flow of the language. It really helps you sound more fluent and less robotic.
I totally agree. It also helps you become more comfortable with the musicality of a language. Every language has its own melody, right? How the sentences rise and fall, the stress on certain syllables. Shadowing really makes you aware of that.
Exactly. That's one thing I love about learning new languages. They each have their own rhythm, their own music. And when you get it right, it's so rewarding. It feels like you're finally speaking the language, not just using it.
That's such a great point. And what about listening comprehension? I know a lot of learners struggle with understanding native speakers, especially when they speak quickly. How do you improve your listening skills?
Listening comprehension can be a real challenge, especially when you're starting out. What worked for me was a combination of slow, controlled listening and gradually increasing the speed. At first, I would listen to podcasts or YouTube videos with subtitles, but eventually, I challenged myself to listen to them without them. It forced me to pay closer attention and really focus on the sounds.
That's a great strategy, starting slow and then gradually ramping up the difficulty. I think it's so important to make the listening experience as real as possible. So, do you listen to anything specific to improve your comprehension, like radio stations or specific podcasts?
Definitely. I listen to a lot of Spanish podcasts, especially ones that have a conversational tone. I find that having real, unscripted conversations helps me pick up on more natural phrases and informal speech. I also love listening to Spanish music. It's a fun way to learn new vocabulary and get used to the flow of the language. Plus, it's a great way to hear different accents.
Music is such an underrated tool. I've heard that listening to songs can help learners pick up slang and expressions too, which isn't something you'd get from textbooks. Do you ever find yourself picking up new phrases from lyrics?
All the time, it's amazing how much you can learn from the lyrics of a song. Sometimes, they'll use slang or phrases that you won't find in a textbook. And it's great because you're learning exactly what people are saying in real life. Plus, when you learn a phrase from a song, it sticks with you because it's attached to the music.
I can totally see that. It's like your brain makes that extra connection. You're learning the meaning of the phrase, and also the rhythm of it through the song. I think learners often underestimate how much music can help with language acquisition.
Definitely. I think any language learner should try to incorporate music into their learning routine. It's one of the most fun ways to keep your brain engaged while also learning. And who doesn't love a good jam session while learning?
I couldn't agree more. Now, Jacob, you mentioned earlier that you're learning Spanish. How do you feel about cultural immersion beyond just speaking the language? Do you think experiencing the culture helps with your language learning?
Without a doubt. Culture and language are so closely tied together. For example, in Spain, the way people speak and their body language reflects their culture. It's all connected. Understanding the culture gives you context for why certain words or phrases are used. It also makes learning more interesting because you can see how language is shaped by history, traditions, and social values.
That's such an insightful point. Language isn't just a tool for communication, it's a reflection of how people live, think, and interact. Have you had any experiences that really helped you understand the culture through language?
Definitely, I remember visiting a market in Barcelona and noticing how friendly and open people were. The way they greeted each other, the words they used, and even their facial expressions, everything was so warm and welcoming. That's when I really started to feel like I understood the language at a deeper level. It wasn't just words, it was the entire vibe of the culture.
That's beautiful. It's moments like that, where you really feel the language, that make everything worthwhile. Right?
Exactly. It's when the language stops feeling like a foreign concept and starts feeling like a part of you. You can connect with people on a much deeper level when you understand not just the language, but the culture behind it.
I think that's why language learning is such a rewarding journey. It's not just about memorizing words, it's about connecting with people, understanding new perspectives, and growing as a person. It's like stepping into someone else's world.
Absolutely. It's one of the most eye-opening experiences you can have. You start to see the world differently, and you begin to realize that learning a new language is like unlocking a whole new way of thinking and seeing things.
That's so true. It's all about perspective. Now, shifting gears a bit, what about motivation? We've talked a lot about staying motivated and pushing through. But how do you handle those times when motivation is low and it feels like progress has stalled?
That's the hardest part of learning a language, staying motivated when you don't see immediate progress. For me, when motivation wanes, I remind myself of the bigger picture. I reflect on why I started learning in the first place. I also try to focus on the process of learning rather than just the end result. If you enjoy the journey, it's easier to stay motivated even when you're not seeing fast results.
That's such a great approach. Focusing on the process, rather than the end result, takes a lot of pressure off. It's easy to get discouraged if you're only looking at the finish line, but enjoying the small victories along the way is what keeps you going.
Exactly. And I think celebrating those small wins is key. Whether it's understanding a sentence or having a short conversation without freezing up, it's those little moments that remind you how far you've come. Those are the moments to celebrate.
Yes, celebrate every milestone. Whether it's completing a lesson, having a successful conversation, or even just learning a new phrase, each step is progress.
Exactly. And when you do that, you keep the momentum going. It's those tiny, consistent efforts that eventually lead to big results.
You know, Jacob, that brings me to another question. What about language plateaus? Have you ever felt like you hit a wall, where it seemed like you weren't improving anymore? How did you break through that?
Oh, definitely. Plateaus are so frustrating. I've had a few moments where I felt like I wasn't making any progress, no matter how much I practiced. What helped me was changing up my routine. I would try something new like watching movies without subtitles or reading books in Spanish. Sometimes, switching methods can help you break out of a rut.
That's a great strategy, mixings up to keep your brain engaged. I've heard people say that if you're feeling stuck, it might be because your brain is processing all the new information in the background, even if you can't see it yet. It's like your brain needs time to catch up.
Exactly. I think a lot of learners forget that. We get impatient because we want to see visible results right away, but language learning is a long process. You might not notice the progress every day, but one day you'll realize that you've come so much farther than you thought.
So true. Sometimes, it's the moments when we stop trying to force progress that we actually experience it. It's like letting the language marinate in your mind, and then suddenly, it clicks.
Yes. And I think it's important to remind yourself that language learning isn't linear. There will be ups and downs, but as long as you keep going, you'll make progress. Even those days are still a part of the learning journey.
That's a really encouraging perspective. Now, Jacob, let's talk about speaking confidence. I know a lot of learners get nervous when it's time to speak in a new language. How did you build up your confidence to speak?
Oh man, that was tough. For me, speaking out loud was always the hardest part. At first, I was scared of making mistakes, but then I realized that mistakes are part of the process. The more I practiced, the more comfortable I got. I also tried speaking to native speakers, even if I made mistakes, because they were usually very patient and encouraging.
I love that. So, you didn't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back. That's such an important lesson. Mistakes are actually a sign that you're trying and learning.
Exactly. And honestly, native speakers can be incredibly understanding. They want to help you, and they appreciate you making an effort to speak their language. The more you speak, the more confident you get. It's all about taking that first step, even if it feels uncomfortable.
Yes, that first step is always the hardest. Once you take it though, it gets easier. And I think it's important to remind learners that confidence doesn't happen overnight. It's built over time with consistent effort.
Exactly. It's like anything else, you get better the more you practice. If you keep putting yourself out there, eventually, it won't be as scary. You'll realize that speaking a new language is just another skill to develop, just like learning to ride a bike or play an instrument.
That's such a helpful way to look at it. And I think a big part of confidence is also accepting that no one speaks perfectly. Even native speakers make mistakes. Right?
Yes, definitely native speakers make mistakes all the time, whether it's a slip of the tongue, using the wrong word, or even mixing up grammar. So, we don't have to aim for perfection. We just need to focus on communication, which is the ultimate goal.
That's such a freeing thought. Once you realize that perfection isn't necessary, it becomes a lot easier to take risks and make progress. And that's what language is all about: communication and connection.
Exactly. The more you focus on communicating and connecting with others, the less you worry about how perfect your speech is. It's all about getting your message across and having a conversation.
I think that's a mindset shift that would help so many learners. Just focus on getting the message out and let go of the fear of making mistakes. That's how you grow.
Absolutely. And remember, even when you make a mistake, you're still being understood. People will still appreciate the effort and will often help you if you don't quite get it right. That's how language learning works. It's a journey, and everyone has been there.
Such an encouraging reminder, Jacob. And speaking of journeys, what would you say to someone who's just starting their language learning adventure? Any tips to keep them motivated?
I would say, first and foremost, don't get discouraged. It's going to take time, and there will be times when you feel like you're not progressing, but keep going. Celebrate the small wins and remember that consistency is key. Even if you only practice for 10 or 15 minutes a day, those little moments add up. Also, try to find joy in the process, whether it's through music, movies, or conversations with others. Enjoying the learning process will help you stick with it.
That's solid advice. Enjoy the journey, no matter how long it takes. Progress might be slow at times, but as long as you keep going, you'll get there.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to take risks. Language learning is all about stepping out of your comfort zone. The more you do that, the quicker you'll learn. Embrace the mistakes and keep having fun with it.
Love it. It's all about embracing the process, staying consistent, and making it fun. Thanks so much for all these great insights, Jacob. I'm sure our listeners are feeling inspired and ready to keep going with their language learning journey.
I hope so. Thanks for having me on the show, Sophia. It's been such a great conversation, and I'm sure anyone listening is now pumped up to keep pushing forward in their learning.
Absolutely. And for everyone tuning in, remember, every step, no matter how small, is progress. Keep practicing, stay curious, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Thanks for listening to another episode of the English Hour. We'll see you next time. Jacob, before we wrap up, one more thing I'd love to ask you. How do you stay motivated when things get really tough, or when you're not seeing immediate results?
That's a good question, Sophia. I think the key for me was remembering why I started learning the language in the first place. I would always come back to my motivation, whether it was the idea of traveling, connecting with new people, or understanding my favorite shows and movies in their original language. Sometimes, it's about reconnecting with that deeper why that keeps me going when the going gets tough.
That's such a powerful point. Reconnecting with the reason behind your learning can reignite that drive. Do you have any other personal tricks that helped you stay on track?
Definitely. One thing I did was set mini goals. Instead of looking at the big picture, I'd set small, achievable targets. It might be as simple as learning 20 new words a week or watching an entire movie in the language without subtitles. Breaking things down like that made me feel accomplished and motivated to keep moving forward.
I love that. Little wins can make such a difference, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed. And tracking progress in small ways, like a new word or phrase learned, can really help you see how far you've come.
Exactly. It also helps to celebrate those small victories. Whether it's treating yourself to something small or just acknowledging your progress, it's important to recognize your hard work.
I agree, celebrating your wins is crucial, and it doesn't always have to be something big. Acknowledge the effort, and it'll make the journey feel more rewarding.
Right? And as you keep hitting those little milestones, you start to build momentum. Soon enough, you look back and realize just how much you've achieved.
Momentum is key, and it's amazing how, even when it feels slow, all that effort adds up over time. Now, let's talk about some fun stuff. Have you ever learned any phrases or words in another language that you found funny or surprising?
All the time. One that comes to mind is the phrase in Spanish, tener mala leche, which literally translates to having bad milk, but it actually means someone's in a bad mood or is unlucky. It just sounds so funny when you translate it directly. I think languages can be so playful in that way.
Haha, that's such a good one. Languages really do have their quirky sides. I love learning those kinds of idioms because they tell you so much about a culture's sense of humor and worldview.
Exactly, it's not just about the words, it's about how people express things differently. Another fun one in French is voir le cafard, which translates to having the cockroach, but it actually means feeling down or sad. It's interesting how languages have these colorful expressions to convey emotions.
That's such a great example. Idioms are so fun to discover, and they really make a language come to life. It's almost like learning a secret code.
Yes, and every time I learn a new idiom, it's like I'm unlocking a new layer of the language. It feels so rewarding to finally understand when someone uses a phrase you've heard but didn't quite understand.
I completely agree. It's those little moments of realization that make the whole learning process so fun. And I think those idiomatic phrases also help you sound more like a native speaker, don't you think?
Absolutely. When you start using idioms and phrases that natives use, it's like you're starting to think in the language instead of just translating. It makes your speech flow more naturally.
I love how languages really shape the way we think. They make us see the world in different ways. And as learners, when we embrace the language, we start to think and speak with that same perspective.
That's the beauty of it, really. It's more than just words, it's an entire way of communicating and understanding the world around you.
Exactly. Language learning is not just about memorizing vocabulary or grammar rules. It's about connecting with others, gaining new perspectives, and expanding your worldview.
Yes, it's a lifelong journey, and every step you take along the way is meaningful. Whether you're just starting out or you've been learning for years, every bit of progress matters.
That's such a beautiful thought. Jacob, this conversation has been amazing. I feel like we've covered so much ground, from motivation to language quirks, and everything in between.
I agree, Sophia. It's been such a pleasure. These kinds of conversations really remind me why I love language learning so much. There's always more to discover.
Absolutely. And I hope our listeners are feeling just as motivated and excited about their language learning journey as we are right now.
I hope so. 2. Remember, it's all about enjoying the process, staying consistent, and embracing the journey, no matter where it takes you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jacob. I'm sure our listeners are going to love this episode.
Thanks for having me, Sophia. It's been fantastic.
It really has been a great conversation, Jacob. And as we keep diving into this idea of language learning, it reminds me of how much of it is about the experience, not just the result. Like, you don't just learn a language to speak, it's the connections you make, the understanding you gain, and the doors it opens for you.
Absolutely. Language is a bridge to new cultures, new experiences, and new friendships. Every time you learn a new word or phrase, it's like you're adding a new tool to your toolkit that helps you navigate the world differently.
That's so well said. And I think people sometimes forget that the goal isn't perfection. It's about communicating, learning, and enjoying the process.
Yes, and being okay with making mistakes. I think a lot of learners feel pressure to get everything right, but mistakes are part of the journey. It's through those mistakes that we grow.
I love that perspective. It's all about progress, not perfection. And even when you make mistakes, you're learning and moving forward. The key is to keep going, even if things feel challenging at times.
Right? And I think the more you embrace that mindset, the less frustrating the process becomes. It starts to feel more like an adventure rather than a task you have to check off.
That's such a positive approach. And let's be real, language learning is an adventure. There's always something new to explore. And every conversation feels like a new opportunity to grow.
Exactly, there's a sense of discovery every time you interact with someone in a new language. Even if you're not fluent yet, the moment you understand a sentence or get your point across, it's so rewarding.
Yes, those little wins are huge. They keep you motivated to push forward. So, for anyone listening who may be struggling right now, what advice would you give them to keep going?
I'd say don't give up. If you feel stuck, try something different, whether it's listening to a podcast, watching a movie, or speaking with a native speaker. Change your approach and see how that helps you reconnect with your motivation. Also, remember to celebrate the small wins and don't be too hard on yourself.
Such great advice. And I think it's also important to remember that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. It's okay if you don't see huge progress every day. Just keep going, and you'll be amazed at how far you've come in the long run.
That's exactly it. And sometimes progress doesn't show up in big leaps, but in the small moments, the times when you understand something without translation, or when you're able to express yourself more clearly. Those are the moments to hold on to.
Absolutely. It's all about those moments of connection. And I think, as language learners, we sometimes focus so much on the destination that we forget to enjoy the journey. But the journey is where all the growth happens.
100%. The destination is important, but the experience of getting there is just as, if not more, meaningful. It's the daily practice, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, that's where all the magic happens.
So true. And I think that's why this whole process of learning a language feels so rewarding. Every day brings something new, and every step forward is a victory.
And don't forget to enjoy those little victories, whether it's having a short conversation, understanding a new phrase, or reading something you never thought you could. Those moments matter.
Right. Every step is progress. And I think the key is to keep an open mind and a positive attitude, even when the going gets tough.
And remember, learning a language isn't just about learning words, it's about opening up to new perspectives and making those connections with others.
I love that, Jacob. So much of language learning is about the people we meet and the connections we build. That's what makes it such a rich and meaningful experience.
Couldn't agree more. And who knows, learning a new language could even change the way you see the world around you.
I think it already has, Jacob. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. It's been so inspiring, and I'm sure our listeners are going to feel the same.
Thanks so much, Sophia. It's been a blast talking to you about all this. I hope people listening feel more motivated to keep pushing forward on their own language journeys.
I'm sure they will. And for anyone listening, remember, keep practicing. Keep enjoying the process. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins. You've got this.
Exactly, keep it up, everyone.
And Jacob, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? Any tips or motivational thoughts to help them stay on track with their language learning journey?
Sure, I'd say one of the most important things is consistency. It's easy to get discouraged when you don't see immediate results. But if you stay consistent, even just 10, 15 minutes a day, you'll start to see progress. Small, regular efforts will eventually pay off big time.
That's such a great point. Even if it feels like you're not making a ton of progress, that consistent effort is what builds up over time. You might not notice it day by day, but looking back in a few months, you'll see how much you've accomplished.
Exactly. And also, try to make learning fun. If you're bored or frustrated, you're less likely to keep going. Find ways to enjoy the process, whether it's through games, songs, or talking to new people. When you have fun with it, you'll feel more motivated.
I couldn't agree more. Finding enjoyment in the learning process is key. And I think language should be something you look forward to, not something that feels like a chore.
Yeah, and another tip is to be patient with yourself. It's easy to compare your progress to others, but everyone learns at their own pace. Celebrate your unique journey and don't rush it.
That's such important advice. Patience really is a virtue when it comes to language learning. We all have our own pace, and that's perfectly fine. It's about the journey, not racing to the finish line.
Exactly, and if you do feel stuck, try to change things up. Whether it's a new resource or a different method, sometimes all you need is a little variety to reignite your motivation.
Great suggestion. Sometimes a fresh perspective can make all the difference. If you've been using the same method for a while, it might be time to try something new to get that excitement back.
Totally. And speaking of fresh perspectives, you could also try immersing yourself in the language. Whether it's watching movies, reading books, or listening to music in the language you're learning, immersion is one of the best ways to really internalize new words and phrases.
Oh, I love that. Immersion is such a powerful tool. And it doesn't feel like studying when you're enjoying a movie or song. You're just having fun while learning.
Exactly, that's the beauty of it. You're learning without even realizing it. And the more you expose yourself to the language, the more natural it starts to feel.
It becomes a part of your daily life. And that's when it all clicks. You're not just learning a language, you're living it.
That's the goal. It's like becoming part of the culture, not just knowing how to say the words.
Yes. And that makes everything so much more meaningful. Language is a bridge to so much more than just words. It's the people, the experiences, and the stories behind those words that make it all come alive.
Absolutely, language is a living, breathing thing. It's constantly evolving, just like the people who speak it.
I think that's a beautiful thought to end on. Language is a journey that connects us to each other and to the world. It's not just about what we can say, but how we can understand, share, and connect.
Well said, Sophia. And for anyone out there feeling like they're struggling, just remember every step you take, no matter how small, is a step toward success. Keep going.
You've got it, Jacob. Keep going, keep learning, and most importantly, keep having fun with it. Thanks so much for joining me today. I think this conversation will really inspire a lot of people.
Thank you for having me, Sophia. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And to everyone listening, best of luck with your language learning journeys. Keep up the great work.
And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Remember, every word you learn brings you closer to your goals. Stay consistent, stay patient, and don't forget to enjoy the ride. We'll see you next time on the English Hour.